Well, let's speak to Robert Clark now, who's Director of Defence and Security at Civitas, the Institute for the Study of Civil Society. Thanks very much indeed for joining us today. Now, this ground invasion into Gaza by the IDF is said to be imminent. What form do you think that this operation may take, given the complications on the ground?
I mean, it has the potential to be quite a long-term, drawn-out conflict from Israel's perspective. If we consider the complications and the complexity of an urban assault in a heavily defended, pre-defended urban area, there's around 40,000 Hamas fighters in Gaza City alone. By the ratio of modern doctrine, that would require Israel to send in around 200,000 troops, backed by, obviously, artillery, air power, and armour. And that's just the land campaign. So Israel's political aim to, obviously, destroy Hamas, that doesn't necessarily mean kill every single 40,000 fighter. It could be to degrade it past the point of military capability, so around 50% of Hamas's fighting strength. But to do so, like I say, in a heavily defended, pre-defended urban area, will be incredibly difficult for Israel. But speaking to sources inside Israel and the IDF who are currently preparing for it, preparations are going very well. They're attempting to minimize the harm to civilians as much as possible, despite much of the international media narrative around that.
Well, before we enter into what you're describing as the international media narrative, let's just focus on the facts for a moment. You say there's 40,000 Hamas fighters inside Gaza City itself. Where are you getting that number from? And what hope do you think there is of the Israeli Defense Forces managing to find and rescue any of the hostages?
No, so the Hamas fighters, their fighting strength is well known. The Hamas leadership based in Qatar have publicly noted the 40,000 figure in Gaza City this week alone. And that's on the conservative end of how many Hamas fighters there are. In terms of the efforts or the likelihood to rescue I think around the 120 civilian hostages still in Gaza, it's going to be incredibly difficult. I know it's an incredible source of contention within Israel right now, with the balancing act between rescuing hostages and the ability to degrade and destroy Hamas. So I think Israel, under no sort of illusion how difficult that aim will be. But to be perfectly honest, I think that will be a secondary aim compared to the destruction, or like I say, the degradation of Hamas itself.
Now, from a defence and security perspective, Robert, which of course you specialise in, what's your take on what was perceived as a huge failing last week by Israeli intelligence and security?
I mean, it would be inappropriate for me at this point to pass judgment or speculation at best as to how the Israeli intelligence security services missed what appears to be some relatively significant signs of increased Hamas military troop movement around the border areas and in Gaza. I'm 100% confident a full independent investigation will determine the failures in due course. And no doubt that's happening as we speak, concurrently to the military build-up along Gaza's borders.
Now, it was expected that the ground offensive would have begun before now, given this evacuation order that was put in place 2 days ago with such a short time frame. The World Health Organization has condemned the evacuation order, referring to it as a death sentence for patients in hospital in North Gaza. Now, there's 22 hospitals in that part of Gaza. What do you think the Israeli Defense Forces will be bearing in mind in terms of trying to protect those areas, if indeed will they? And do you think that could perhaps have stalled this decision to carry out a ground offensive before now?
I think you're perfectly right. I think the ability for innocent Gazan civilians to move out of the northern area that's been identified as the Israeli sort of main effort has played fundamentally into Israel's planning considerations to try and give Gazan civilians as much time as possible without losing the initiative that they need to retain for their military assault. This is a war. I remember in both the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, in which I fought, there was very little of the same level and the degree to which international organizations were trying to warn and advance the incoming sort of civilian casualties. It's a prerequisite, unfortunately, for war. And whilst no civilian casualty can be justified, it is well known and well documented that Hamas used civilians and civilian casualties to further their own objectives. And that includes launching Hamas assaults and Hamas firing points from medical facilities and schools, mosques and churches. These are well documented instances. So I think Israel will take every precaution that's possible, but it's unfortunate to note that, unfortunately, in war, there will be civilian casualties.
OK, Robert Clark, it's been very interesting to get your thoughts today. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.